A man with terminal cancer was abandoned by his wife and daughter. Months later, they returned to collect their inheritance and had no idea what was in store for them. Gregory was a man who lived for business. At 52, he was proud of everything he had achieved. He owned one of the most renowned car dealerships in the city. His career had not been easy. Each achievement came at the cost of sacrifices, sleepless nights, and a determination that impressed everyone around him. Gregory not only ran his business, but was its soul. He knew every detail of the operation, every loyal customer, every piece of inventory. His routine was practically a sacred ritual. Gregory would wake up early, prepare a simple breakfast, analyze reports before the clock struck 7, and make a point of stopping by the showroom early to make sure everything was in order. He was meticulous. Nothing escaped his watchful eye. However, something began to change. Small signs appeared, almost imperceptible at first. Gregory, who had always been full of energy, began to feel tired for no apparent reason. It must be the stress, he thought to himself, shrugging off the feeling of weakness that was becoming more frequent. After all, running a successful business was no joke. Gregory attributed his fatigue to the responsibilities he carried. Abigail, his wife, noticed something different about her husband. "You've been eating less lately, Gregory," she commented one morning as he hurried to get his coffee to go to work. "You look thinner too. Don't you think you should see a doctor?" Gregory, however, had a ready answer. "I don't have time for this stuff, Abigail. I'm fine. It's just tiredness." The days passed, and the symptoms intensified. Gregory felt his energy draining. One day, as he got out of bed, a strong nausea suddenly hit him. Gregory lost his balance and had to hold on to the dresser to keep from falling. Abigail ran to him, frightened. "Gregory, this isn't normal. You're going to the doctor, and I don't want to hear excuses this time." With no other options, Gregory gave in. He scheduled an appointment with Dr. Teresa, a trusted physician who had been taking care of his family's health for years. On the day of the appointment, Gregory felt uncomfortable. The office's normally welcoming waiting room felt suffocating to him at that moment. As he gazed at the pictures of serene landscapes on the walls, a sense of unease filled his chest. Something inside him told him that this visit to the doctor would change everything. "Gregory, how are you?" Dr. Teresa asked with a warm smile as she invited him into the office. He described his symptoms briefly, almost disinterestedly. "It can't be anything serious, doctor. Maybe just overwork." But Teresa's expression changed as she listened. "We'll run some tests to be sure," she said in a firm but gentle tone. The wait for the results was agonizing. Gregory tried to convince himself that everything would be fine. "It's just a few routine tests," he repeated to himself like a mantra. But deep down, he knew that it wasn't all there was to it. Days later, when he returned to the office to hear the results, he found Dr. Teresa with a serious expression on his face. She sighed before beginning to speak. "Gregory, the tests revealed something serious. It's cancer, and it's terminal." These words hit Gregory like a blow. "Terminal," he repeated in disbelief. His mind was spinning. He had taken such pride in his health, his vitality, and now he was facing a sentence he couldn't ignore. 6 months. That was the deadline the doctor had given him. How was that possible? Gregory had always dedicated himself to building a stable life for himself and his family, and now time was slipping through his fingers. As he drove home that day, Gregory drove in silence. He didn't even turn on the radio, something he always did to relieve stress. He needed the silence to think. But his mind was in turmoil. How could he tell his family? How could he face something so final and relentless? Life as Gregory knew it had changed forever, and he knew that from that moment on, every decision would be even more important. Gregory sat alone on the porch of his house, watching the horizon as the sky turned orange in the late afternoon. He was holding a cup of coffee, but the liquid was already cold. His fingers played absently with the handle of the mug as his mind wandered, replaying the last few days like a confusing and painful movie. Dr. Teresa's diagnosis seemed surreal, as if it had happened to someone else. He couldn't believe that the word terminal was now part of his life. 6 months, he murmured, as if saying it out loud would make it more real. He closed his eyes and let his mind drift back to the days when he first started his career. Gregory had come from nothing. He had worked hard, sacrificing sleep and family time to build his business. All for them, he thought. He always justified his long hours by saying he was securing a future for Abigail and their daughter. He remembered the day he had signed the most important contract of his career, the fulfillment of a dream he had dreamed of since he was a young man. It was a sunny morning, and Abigail was in the audience, beaming with pride as he took the stage to speak. After his speech, she hugged him and said, "We are so proud of you, but I hope you can make more time for us now." He had promised he would, but he never did. Was it worth it? The question echoed in his mind. Gregory thought of the missed birthday parties, the children's school performances he always promised to attend, but never got around to. He remembered the look of disappointment in Abigail's eyes when he left for yet another meeting, even after long days away from home. As he reflected, he realized that he had built a comfortable life for his family, but at the cost of moments that could never be recovered. Gregory had invested so much in their financial security, but now, faced with the finiteness of his life, none of that seemed to matter. A silent tear ran down his face. Gregory wiped it away hurriedly, as if he wanted to hide even from himself the vulnerability that was beginning to overflow. The weight of regret mixed with the fear of the unknown. Abigail appeared at the balcony door, watching him silently. Gregory sensed her presence, but did not turn around. After a few seconds, he murmured, "I just wish I had more time to fix things." She came over, sat down next to him, and placed her hand over his. "We still have time, Gregory. Maybe not as much as we would like, but enough to do what really matters." Those words resonated like an invitation for Gregory to rethink what he would do with the days he had left. For the first time in years, he decided that maybe it was time to stop looking at the past and focus on what he could still build in the present. Gregory sat in the living room, his heart heavier than ever before. Across from him, Chloe, his oldest daughter, looked at him with a calm smile. She had no idea what was coming, and that made the conversation even more difficult. He took a deep breath, but the air seemed to not reach his lungs. "Chloe, we need to talk," he said, finally breaking the silence. She tilted her head to the side, curious. "Sure, Dad. What is it? It seems serious." "It's serious." He looked at the floor, trying to organize the words in his mind. Everything seemed wrong. How could he tell her this without breaking her heart? Chloe leaned forward, now worried. "Dad, you're scaring me. What happened?" Gregory slowly raised his eyes, meeting hers. "I went to the doctor. I had some tests done, and they found something." Chloe's face changed instantly, her smile fading. "They found what?" "No, Dad. Don't tell me it's something serious." He swallowed hard. "It's cancer, Chloe, and it's advanced." For a moment she stood completely still. Her eyes blinked rapidly as if trying to process his words. Then she shook her head. "It can't be true. That's not possible." "Chloe!" He tried to take her hand, but she jerked away, standing up abruptly. "No, you're wrong. There must be some error in the tests. There are treatments these days. You're strong, Dad. You'll get through this." "I wish it were that way, my daughter," he said, his voice shaking. But the doctor was clear. There's no cure. They gave me 6 months. The words hung in the air like a cruel blow. Chloe staggered back, covering her mouth with her hands. Tears began to stream down her face, and Gregory felt his heart break even more as he watched her suffering. "This isn't fair, Dad," she cried, openly crying now. "You've always been so strong, so healthy. How can this be happening?" He stood up, walking over to her, and this time he managed to take her hands in his. "I know it's not fair, Chloe, and I'm sorry I have to tell you this. But I want you to know that I'm here, and we still have time together. Let's use that time as best we can." Chloe shook her head slowly, still trying to accept reality. "Dad, I can't lose you. Not now." "You won't really lose me," he said, pulling her into a hug. "As long as we're together, as long as I'm here, I want to create memories that you'll carry with you forever. And when I'm gone, my love for you will live on, Chloe." Chloe cried into his shoulder, but then, between sobs, she whispered, "I'll be there for you, Dad. We'll get through this together, every step of the way." Gregory closed his eyes, allowing himself a moment of relief at hearing her promise. Despite everything, he knew that his daughter's love would be his strength in the months to come. The days passed slowly, and Gregory felt the weight of each minute like a stone on his shoulders. What had once been a home full of voices, laughter, and family warmth was beginning to turn into a cold, empty space. He could see it most clearly in the small details. Chloe, who had previously promised to be by his side every step of the way, now seemed busy all the time. First came the innocent excuses, an important project at work, an unavoidable appointment with friends. Then came the longer silences, the unanswered messages, and the increasingly rare visits. One Saturday afternoon, Gregory was sitting on the porch, looking out at the empty street. Chloe had promised to stop by for lunch with him and Abigail, but it was almost evening, and there was no sign of her. He tried to call, but the call went straight to voicemail. Abigail came out of the kitchen and placed a cup of tea on the table next to him. "Are you still waiting for Chloe?" "She said she'd come today," he replied, trying to hide the disappointment in his voice. Abigail shrugged, her expression indifferent. "You know how she is, always so busy with her own life. Don't expect too much." Her words cut deep. Abigail had been his greatest source of comfort before, but lately even that seemed to have changed. She was distant, almost as if she were disconnected from his suffering. "Don't you think we should call her again?" Gregory asked, looking to his wife for some reassurance. "If she wanted to be here, she would be," Abigail replied coolly as she cleared away the dinner plates. Gregory fell silent, feeling the emptiness growing inside him. Abigail's indifference hurt almost as much as Chloe's absence. Where were the promises of support, the commitment to face everything together? A week later, Chloe finally showed up. Gregory tried to hide the mix of relief and hurt when he saw her walk through the door. "Chloe, I thought you weren't coming anymore." She smiled tightly and sat down in the chair farthest from him. "Sorry, Dad. Things at work have been complicated." "I understand," Gregory replied, trying to sound understanding, even though each excuse she made felt like a knife sticking deeper. But Gregory couldn't ignore how uncomfortable she looked. She avoided his eyes, changed the subject whenever he tried to talk about her health, and then quickly made up some excuse to leave. After Chloe left, Gregory looked at Abigail, who was sitting on the couch, distracted by her phone. "Have you noticed how distant she's been?" Abigail didn't even look up. "It's not easy for Chloe, Gregory, or for me. We can't put our lives on hold because of this." Her words hit him like a punch. "Put our lives on hold? I am your life, Abigail. Or at least I thought I was." She sighed, finally looking up at him. "You don't understand how hard this is for me, too. I'm just tired. I don't know what else to do." "So, you've given up?" Gregory asked, a lump in his throat. Abigail didn't answer. She just got up and went to her room, leaving him alone in the living room. Gregory stood there, feeling the loneliness enveloping him. The house was silent, but not in a peaceful way. It was the kind of silence that screamed absences, that echoed the pain of broken promises and broken bonds. Gregory looked at the family photo on the shelf, taken on a happy summer years ago. Everyone was smiling, full of love and hope. "What happened to us?" he whispered, as the tears finally began to fall. The days dragged on, and Gregory felt the loneliness growing around him like a silent shadow, heavy and oppressive. Chloe's distance, Abigail's coldness, and the silence that filled the once vibrant spaces of the house left him increasingly lost. Gregory woke up every morning waiting for some change, some gesture that indicated that there was still a connection with his family. But the changes never came. Chloe called less and less, and Abigail spent long periods on her cell phone or watching TV, as if his presence was just another element in the environment, not something to be noticed or cared for. One night, while going through his old photo album, Gregory found himself lost in memories. There were records of birthdays, family vacations, moments filled with laughter and togetherness. He ran his fingers over a picture of Chloe as a child, holding his hand as they built a sandcastle on the beach. At that moment, a searing pain tightened his chest. "How did we get here?" he murmured to himself, tears streaming freely. Gregory tried to reach out to his wife for answers, but her conversations were short, punctuated by automatic words. "Abigail," he said once, sitting down next to her on the couch, "I feel like I'm disappearing." Abigail sighed, not looking up from the television. "You're thinking too much, Gregory. Things are hard for all of us." "Hard?" Gregory shook his head in disbelief. "I'm going through this alone, Abigail. I just wish I could feel like you're still here with me." She finally looked at him, but what Gregory saw in her eyes was not understanding, nor comfort, but weariness, and perhaps even a hint of irritation. "Do you think this is easy for me? I have to deal with everything while this is happening." That shut him up. This. She referred to his condition as something distant, something impersonal, almost as if it were an inconvenience. After this conversation, Gregory gave up insisting. He began to retreat even more to his room or to the balcony, where he could watch the movement of the streets, trying to find some distraction from the outside world. Gregory began to wonder if perhaps it would be better to move away too, sparing everyone, including himself, from the discomfort that his presence seemed to cause. More than the physical pain of the disease, the loneliness he felt was what really destroyed him inside. In one of his loneliest moments, he took out a notebook and began to write, trying to put into words everything he felt, all the longing for a time when his family was his foundation. "If this is how things end," he wrote, his hand shaking, "then maybe I failed, not as a businessman, but as a father and a husband. Because if they're not here now, where did I go wrong that this happened?" The pages of that notebook became his only confidant. They held his regrets, his memories, and even his hopes, however faint, that maybe, before it was too late, something could change. Amidst the loneliness that enveloped him, Gregory found an unexpected ray of light in Declan, his old childhood friend. Declan, upon learning of the situation, did not hesitate to show up at his house, bringing with him not only words of comfort, but also actions. "Did you think I was going to let you go through this alone?" Declan said warmly, as he walked into Gregory's living room with a bag full of fresh fruit and an encouraging smile on his face. "Have you forgotten who got you out of trouble when we were kids?" Gregory tried to hide his emotion. "You didn't need to worry so much, Declan." "You did," his friend replied, putting the bag in the kitchen. "And I'm going to keep worrying, so you better get used to it." Over time, Declan became a constant presence, taking care of the little details that Gregory no longer had the strength to deal with. He drove him to doctor's appointments, kept him company on dull afternoons, and reminded him that there were still bonds that would not be broken. The arrival of Jessica, a young woman of only 23 and the daughter of a mutual friend, was an even bigger surprise. She had known Gregory since she was a little girl, but they had never been close. When she learned of his condition, she decided she wanted to help. "I know I might not be the best person for this," Jessica said, as she entered his house for the first time, holding a stack of books. "But my dad always talked about how important you were to our family, and if there's one thing I've learned from him, it's that no one should have to go through this alone." Gregory was initially taken aback. "Jessica, you're so young. You have your own life, your own plans. You shouldn't be worrying about me." "Maybe," she replied with a sweet smile, setting the books down on the table. "But I chose to be here. And if there's anything I can do to make you feel a little better, then it's worth it." Jessica brought a new energy to the house. She read stories to Gregory, helped him organize his life's memories into scrapbooks, and even encouraged him to write more in his notebook. "These words you write," she once said, "are powerful. One day, who knows, they might inspire others." Declan and Jessica together were an unlikely but essential duo. Declan, with his dry humor and pragmatism, and Jessica, with her tenderness and youthful determination, filled the empty spaces left by Abigail and Chloe's separation. One afternoon, as Jessica helped Gregory walk through the garden, Declan watched from afar, leaning against the porch wall. "See? There are still people who care," he said, his tone teasing and a smile on his face. "Yeah, it seems that way," Gregory replied, a slight twinkle in his eye. Even in the midst of emotional and physical chaos, he found in these two unlikely angels a reason to keep fighting, even if it was just one more day at a time. They not only cared for him, but they also reminded him that there was still beauty and goodness in the world, even when everything seemed to be falling apart. The bond between Gregory, Jessica, and Declan grew stronger each day. Jessica, with her gentleness and patience, took on the most challenging tasks. She helped Gregory get up, feed himself, and even endure the most intense pain, not only physical, but also emotional. One morning, as she helped Gregory adjust the pillow on the living room chair, Jessica gave him a loving look. "I brought you something today," she said, pulling a small package from her bag. Gregory raised his eyebrows curiously. "What is this?" "A keepsake," she replied, unwrapping it carefully. It was an old photograph of Gregory, Abigail, and Chloe in a park years ago. "I thought it might bring you some comfort. You look happy here." He was silent for a moment, holding the photo with trembling hands. "Happy? Yes, I was. But now it feels like another life." "Maybe it is," Jessica said softly, sitting down next to him. "But that doesn't mean it's over. You're still here. You can still create happy moments, even if they're different." Meanwhile, Declan brought a different kind of energy. He made a point of pulling Gregory out of his melancholy with funny stories and light-hearted moments. One afternoon, he showed up with an old guitar and started playing an off-key song. "Oh, no, Declan," Gregory protested, laughing for the first time in weeks. "This is torture." "You call it torture, I call it art," Declan replied, grinning mischievously as he insisted on playing and singing. "This can't be considered music on any planet," Gregory scoffed as Jessica laughed in the background. "Maybe not," Declan said, putting the guitar aside. "But if it made you laugh, it was worth it." Between Jessica's care and Declan's easygoing humor, Gregory found a new kind of comfort. They encouraged him to reflect on what really mattered in life. "You know," Declan said in a late-night conversation as they shared a cup of tea in the backyard, "we spend so much time chasing the big things, but sometimes it's the simple things that stick." Simple, Gregory murmured, looking up at the starry sky. Like being here, now, with you. Although Abigail and Chloe's abandonment still stung, Declan and Jessica showed Gregory that he wasn't completely alone. They helped him reclaim moments of joy and meaning, offering him a chance to say goodbye to the world in a more peaceful way. These two unlikely caregivers were proof that even in the most difficult moments, life could surprise him with genuine gestures of love and friendship. The next morning, the silence in the house seemed heavier than usual. Gregory could sense something different in the air, but he couldn't quite put his finger on it. Abigail and Chloe were in the living room, talking quietly, but he knew something important was about to be said. When he entered the room, Abigail stood, avoiding looking directly at him. Chloe stood with her arms crossed, leaning against the wall, her expression grim. "Gregory, we need to talk," Abigail began, her voice firm but emotionless. His chest tightened. "Talk to me, then." "I'm listening." Abigail took a deep breath, trying to find the words. "Chloe and I have decided that we're going to leave home. We're going to my sister's house, at least for a while." Gregory stood still. For a moment, it seemed as if the world around him had stopped. He looked from Abigail to Chloe, waiting for his daughter to say something, to deny her decision, but she remained silent. "You're going to leave me here, alone?" he asked, his voice shaking. "It's not that, Gregory," Abigail replied, trying to justify herself. "It's just, I can't do it anymore. I can't deal with it. Chloe too. We're exhausted." "Exhausted?" He laughed bitterly in disbelief. "Are you exhausted? What about me? What do you think it's like to wake up every day knowing that time is running out? What do you think it's like to face this alone, while the people I love the most turn their backs on me?" Chloe finally spoke, but her voice was cold. "You don't understand, Dad. It's not easy for us either. Every day it's like we're saying goodbye to you a little more. It's unbearable." "So you're leaving?" He shook his head in disbelief. "Is that the solution? Running away?" "We're not running away," Abigail insisted, crossing her arms. "We're trying to survive. We can't help you if we can't handle this." The words were like knives to Gregory's heart. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. "I always thought family was there to support each other, especially in the hardest times. But it seems I was wrong." Abigail sighed, picked up her bag, and took a step toward the door. Chloe hesitated for a moment, but soon followed. "Let's get everything organized so you won't be left stranded," Abigail said before leaving. Gregory remained where he was, staring at the empty space they had left. His mind was spinning, alternating between sadness and a feeling of abandonment so deep it almost felt physical. When the door closed, the house felt emptier than ever. He tried to hold back the tears, but they came hard, bringing with them a pain he had never experienced before. Now, Gregory was truly alone. With his family's abandonment, Gregory found himself sinking into loneliness, more than ever. The house, once full of laughter and shared moments, now felt like a silent prison. Every corner echoed the absence of Abigail and Chloe, and he wondered if there would ever be a reconciliation. The hours passed slowly, and no matter how hard he tried to maintain a routine, he felt like he was losing himself. It was at that moment that Declan, his longtime friend, appeared at the door. Declan had always been someone he could trust, someone who knew him deeply, someone with whom he had shared the ups and downs of life. And although there had been a growing emotional distance, their friendship had never been broken. "May I come in?" Declan asked, his smile easy, but his eyes full of concern. Gregory didn't need any more words. Declan's presence, without him having to ask, meant more than anything he could ever say. "Of course, always welcome," he replied, his voice husky. Declan stepped inside and looked around. Not much was out of place, but the energy in the house was tired. He approached Gregory, who was sitting on the couch, hands clasped together, lost in thought. "I heard about what happened to Abigail and Chloe," Declan said gently. "And I want you to know that I'm not going to leave you alone." Gregory looked at him surprised. "Declan, you don't have to do this. I'm already a burden to everyone." Declan shook his head, as if he didn't want to hear any more. "You're not a burden, Gregory. You're my friend. I'll stay here with you, if that's what you need." "But what about your life? You have a job, a house, a family?" Gregory hesitated, feeling shame hit him. "I don't want to be a burden to you." "Listen," Declan said, his tone firm but friendly. "I'm not staying here out of obligation. I'm staying because I want to. We've always been together in difficult times, and this is the time when I'll be here for you, whether it's to talk, to help with anything, or even just to be silent by your side." Declan then stood up and began to pack his things. "I'll get some clothes and bring some things to stay here. You need someone to take care of you, and I'm more than willing to be that person." Gregory was speechless, touched by his friend's attitude. He knew the situation was difficult for everyone around him, but Declan wasn't giving up on him. This gesture of generosity, of being by his side, meant more than anything else. It was the hope he had already lost, renewed in a simple act of friendship. That evening, as the sun set over the horizon, Declan was already settled into Gregory's home, adjusting to his new surroundings. But more than the objects he brought, his presence brought something that had been lost, the sense that, despite everything, he was not alone. Declan sat down next to Gregory and said with a soft smile, "Don't worry. I'm here. We'll get through this together." And for the first time in weeks, Gregory felt a small comfort. He knew that there was still time, and that as long as Declan was by his side, he wouldn't face his final moments alone. The next few days passed more quickly than Gregory could have imagined. He and Declan began to develop a routine. His friend, who seemed to have a gift for making the hours seem lighter, not only helped him with the daily tasks, but was also a constant source of emotional support. Declan brought with him funny stories, shared memories of happier times, and an energy that, as much as Gregory tried to maintain, had been lost over the months of grief and separation. Jessica, the young daughter of Gregory's old friend, also became an essential presence in his life. She not only helped with the daily care, but brought with her a vitality that seemed to infect the room. Always attentive to Gregory's needs, she would chat with him about small things, like his taste for certain types of food, or remind him of good times from the past, trying her best not to make him feel forgotten or abandoned. "Do you remember that Italian restaurant we used to love so much?" Jessica asked one day, smiling softly. "I still remember how you talked about the lasagna." Gregory smiled, the memory of a simpler time coming flooding back. "Yes, the lasagna. I don't think I've ever had anything so good. You always had a good choice of places." "If you want," Jessica suggested gently, "we can have a lasagna night here. I promise it will be almost as good as the one at the restaurant." Gregory looked at her, touched by the offer. "That would be wonderful, my young friend. I would love it." In the days that followed, Jessica threw herself into the task. She spent hours in the kitchen, playing with spices, and with every laugh or word she spoke, Gregory felt a new warmth, something he thought had disappeared from his life. Declan was no slouch either. Whenever he could, he took the time to hang out with Gregory. They would spend hours talking about everything and nothing. Sometimes they would talk about the past, about business, about how the world seemed to have changed, but they would also reflect on how moments of friendship and love were immortal. Declan had a unique ability to bring laughter, even on the hardest days. He would talk about the memories they shared, reminding Gregory that despite the circumstances, he was not alone. "You know," Declan said one afternoon, "it's not the quantity of days we have that matters, It's the quality of them. I know, Gregory replied thoughtfully. And with you and Jessica here, I think I'm learning to live more meaningfully, even at the end. There was something deeply moving about the way Declan and Jessica cared for him. It wasn't just out of obligation, but out of genuine love. They knew Gregory's days were numbered, but instead of letting him wallow in grief, they tried to make those moments as rich and meaningful as possible. With every laugh, with every story told, he felt a new meaning for the days that remained. The pain was still there, but it no longer dominated his emotions. Now he was beginning to value love and friendship with a depth he had never known before. That evening, as they ate Jessica's lasagna, Gregory felt more at peace than he had in a long time. He looked at Declan and the young woman, and with a choked voice he said, "I don't know how to thank you, not only for everything you have done for me, but for making me feel that there is still so much to live for." Declan smiled, his expression soft and full of understanding. "You don't need to thank us, Gregory. Love and friendship are priceless. We are just giving back everything you have always been to us." Jessica, with a genuine smile, agreed. "That's right. It doesn't matter how much time you have. What matters is how you live it. And you, Gregory, have shown us the true meaning of living with dignity and gratitude." Gregory smiled, feeling a lightness in his chest. He knew his time was running out, but he never imagined that he would find so much peace in the last few days. With Declan and Jessica by his side, he felt that, in the end, life was made not of great deeds, but of gestures of love, friendship, and companionship. They gave him a new perspective on his journey, and he finally felt at peace with everything he had experienced. Gregory's treatments were becoming increasingly expensive, so he had to make a difficult decision. Selling his auto shop was one of the hardest decisions of his life. The shop, which represented everything he had achieved, was much more than just a business to him. It was a symbol of his journey, of all the effort, sacrifice, and sleepless nights he had put into making sure his family had the best. There, he had started from scratch, overcome immense challenges, and had gradually become a successful man. But now, everything that seemed important was being put to the test, and the reality of his health condition was forcing him to make decisions he never imagined. The disease had become relentless over time. The treatments were no longer working as expected, and Gregory knew he didn't have much time left. The medical bills, including medication and consultations, were quickly eating away at his savings. Although Declan and Jessica were incredibly supportive emotionally and physically, Gregory didn't want to be a burden to them. He knew he would need resources to ensure his family was taken care of while maintaining his dignity in his final days. And so, after much thought, he decided that selling his store was inevitable. When he sat down with Declan to discuss it, the decision was difficult to articulate. He took a deep breath, the words weighing on his mind. "I need to sell the store, Declan," he said, his voice low but firm. "The medical costs are too high, and I can't keep the business going anymore." Declan looked at him with concern, but also with understanding. He knew this wasn't easy for Gregory. "I understand, my friend," Declan replied, the pain evident in his eyes. "I know how much this means to you, but sometimes we have to make sacrifices to make sure our last days are as peaceful as possible." Gregory nodded, but the pain in his heart was evident. "It's like I'm saying goodbye to my entire life, Declan. Every corner of that store has a story, a moment I've lived, every car I've sold, every customer who's come in. It's all a part of me." Declan walked over to him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "I know, Gregory, and nothing will ever erase what you've done, everything you've built. But the most important thing right now is you. You've done everything you could. Now it's time to rest and let others take care of you." With Declan's support, Gregory began preparing for the sale. He reviewed the paperwork, hired a broker, and though each step was painful, he felt like there was no other option. The store would be his last big farewell. but he was determined to do it right, to ensure that the funds would be sufficient to cover whatever was needed. When the buyer came forward and the sale was finally completed, Gregory felt an emptiness. The keys to the store had been handed over, and with them, a part of his life. He took one last look at the place that had been his pride and sustenance for so many years, and for a moment he felt small, lost. But then Declan appeared at his side, as he always had. "You're not alone, Gregory. I'm here, and I always will be, no matter what. That doesn't define who you are, what you've done, what you've built. No one can take away from you." Gregory smiled weakly, but genuinely. "Thank you, Declan. I don't know what I'd do without you." Declan looked at him and said, with a gentleness that only great friends have, "You'll figure it out, buddy. But the important thing is that as long as you can, you'll continue to make your mark in ways you can't even imagine." The decision to sell the store was a painful milestone in Gregory's life, but it was also a reminder that true wealth wasn't found in property, money, or recognition. It was found in the people around him, those who were willing to walk alongside him through the toughest times. And although he had to give up something that represented so much of his story, Gregory finally understood that what really mattered was the peace and love he found in his final days with Declan and Jessica. In Gregory's final days, the physical pain was constant, but his mind slowly found a peace he never imagined he would achieve. The disease, although cruel and overwhelming, was not able to erase the brightness of his humanity. His weakened body did not prevent him from feeling the love and dedication that surrounded him, and that was what, in some way, gave him comfort. Declan and Jessica became his true family. They were there every day without him having to ask. Young Jessica, with her serene smile, became his tireless caregiver, ensuring that Gregory found comfort in every small gesture. She adjusted his pillows, prepared the food he could eat, and read to him in a low voice, her soft words like a melody that he almost felt as if it were a caress. Declan, on the other hand, remained the same friend he had always been. He knew that Gregory did not need empty words, so he would often sit silently beside him, simply offering his presence, the only thing that seemed to matter now. When Gregory managed, he would give him a grateful smile, and Declan would return it with a look full of compassion. Even without words, there was a deep understanding between the two. They had shared so many moments throughout their lives, from their youth to that final painful phase. Now, Declan did his best to give Gregory back a little of what he had always done for so many around him. One warm summer afternoon, Gregory was sitting in the armchair with Jessica by his side. She was reading a book to him, but when she noticed that he seemed distant, she stopped reading. "Are you okay, Uncle Gregory?" she asked, her expression soft with concern. He looked at her and, with a tired smile, replied, "Yes, my dear. I was just thinking about life, about what really matters." Jessica put the book down on the table and leaned a little closer to him. "What do you think matters, Uncle?" Gregory took a deep breath, trying to find the words. "Life is full of moments and decisions, isn't it? But in the end, what really counts are the people who are by your side. I spent so much time working, achieving, reaching for more and more. Now I see that the greatest value is in what you give to others, not in what you accumulate." Declan, who was sitting in a chair nearby, heard Gregory's words and approached. "You have always been an example of hard work, my friend, but you have also been an example of loyalty and friendship. You have taught us more than any amount of money or success could teach." Gregory looked at Declan, touched by the words. "I know I did the best I could, Declan, and even if not everyone in my life understands that, I know I can go in peace. Because you're here with me." Declan smiled, his emotions running high. "And we will be, until the very end, Gregory. Until the very end." Jessica took Gregory's hand and held it affectionately. "You're a very strong man, Uncle, and you don't have to worry about anything anymore. Now, it's time to rest and live these moments with us." Gregory felt Jessica's words like a balm for his soul. The physical pain was unbearable, but the warmth of her presence and the affection of Declan and Jessica enveloped him, giving him strength he never imagined he would find. He smiled, feeling an inner peace that calmed him, as if he had finally understood the true meaning of living. In those last moments, Gregory experienced a sense of tranquility. The loneliness and abandonment of his family had been painful, but when he found himself surrounded by those who genuinely loved him, he found the peace he had been looking for. The love and friendship he had given and received throughout his life were the most precious legacy he could leave behind. He knew that despite having lost so much, he was not alone in the end. Time passed slowly, and Gregory, with Jessica's hand in his and Declan sitting across from him, closed his eyes for the last time. He no longer feared the end, for he knew at last that what truly mattered was what he left in people's hearts, not what he left behind. And with his last breaths, he found true peace, surrounded by the love he had always sought and had finally found in Declan and Jessica. After Gregory's death, the atmosphere in their old home between Declan and Jessica was imbued with a sad but comforting tranquility. Declan had arranged everything with the greatest care. Jessica, with her sensitivity, helped to maintain the welcoming atmosphere, just as Gregory would have wanted. They had kept their promise to be by his side until his last breath, and now they were facing the void that their friend's departure had left. However, the calm was interrupted when the door to Declan's house opened, revealing the figure of Abigail, Gregory's ex-wife, accompanied by Chloe, his daughter. They both entered with an imposing posture, but the shadow of guilt and the expectation of inheritance hung over them. Abigail, with her closed expression, seemed to be trying to disguise the tension, while Chloe walked beside her, her face distant, as if she already knew what brought them there. Declan was sitting at the table reviewing some documents when he saw them enter. He stood up, a little surprised, but without showing exaggerated emotions. Jessica, who was at her side, just watched in silence, knowing that this moment would not be easy. Abigail, without wasting time, was direct. "Declan, we are here because we need to talk about Gregory's assets. He made everything very clear in those last days, didn't he? And as you well know, we are entitled to his inheritance. We need to know what he left for us." Declan stared at Abigail with a calm but serious look. "I'm sorry, Abigail, but Gregory left everything to me and Jessica." The words fell like a weight in the room. Abigail seemed to lose her composure for a second. "What? What do you mean? He left us out?" Her voice was full of disbelief and anger, and Chloe, at her side, seemed equally surprised, but her expression was more of contained frustration. Jessica, who had been silent until then, spoke softly. "Yes, he made that choice. During the last months of his life, he and Declan shared something that you could never understand. He loved you, but he knew who was truly there for him, who gave him comfort, who was there for him when no one else was." Abigail stepped forward, her posture rigid. "You have no right to talk like that, Jessica. He was my husband, and you were just a friend, a young woman who was trying to help, but you were not family." Chloe, visibly shaken, didn't say a word, but her gaze seemed to speak for her. It was as if she had been overcome by a mixture of anger and sadness. She finally turned to Declan and asked, her voice shaking, "But why did he do this? We were his family, Declan. How could he exclude us like that?" Declan sighed, looking at Gregory's daughter with an air of understanding, but also of firmness. "Because, Chloe, throughout his life, your father did everything he could to ensure the best for everyone. But in his last days, He understood that true loyalty, love, and support don't come from family obligations, but from the choices he made over time. Jessica and I were the ones who stood by him when he needed it most. His family, unfortunately, was absent. Abigail looked at Chloe, as if seeking an explanation or even some kind of support, but her daughter seemed in shock, absorbing Declan's words. The silence that followed was filled with an indescribable weight. Chloe finally spoke, her voice wavering, almost as if she was struggling to swallow the bitter truth. I didn't know he needed me. I was so caught up in my own world, in my own worries. And when he needed me the most, I walked away. I have no excuses. Abigail, still furious, turned to Jessica. I don't understand how you, of all people, took something that should have been ours. What else did you do to deserve this? Jessica didn't flinch. I just did what was right. Gregory was more than a friend to me. He was a mentor, a father figure, and when he asked me to be there for him, I was there. And over time, I've realized that sometimes what we give out comes back to us in unexpected ways. Declan then approached Abigail and Chloe, his gaze firm, but also full of empathy. I know this isn't easy for you, but the reality is that Gregory made his decisions clearly. He didn't want to be remembered for who he was in the past, but for the care he had shown in recent times. And, in that sense, he trusted us. The tension in the room was palpable. Abigail, still uncomfortable, tried to maintain her composure, but something in her eyes indicated that she knew there was nothing more she could do. She turned to Chloe, who was still silent, lost in her own thoughts. Finally, it was Chloe who spoke, her voice low but firm. I understand. I don't agree, but I understand. It's too late to go back now, but I need to learn from this. I need to be a better person. Abigail, with tears in her eyes, looked at her daughter, realizing how much she was being affected by all of this. What remained now was no longer the desire for an inheritance, but rather a feeling of regret, an emptiness that nothing could fill. Declan, who had watched everything in silence, finally spoke. I'm not here to cause more pain. I just want you to know that, despite everything, Gregory left us a legacy greater than any material possession could offer. What he taught all of us is that what really matters is the way we live and the way we love. And so, Abigail and Chloe's visit ended, with a heavy silence hanging in the air. They had arrived expecting an inheritance, but they left with the certainty that, despite his absence, Gregory had left behind something much more valuable: the choices made with love, loyalty, and sincerity. Gregory's will was read in a somber atmosphere, in Declan's house, where peace had returned after the turmoil of the last few weeks. Declan and Jessica were present, waiting with a mixture of apprehension and respect for the revelation of Gregory's last words. Abigail and Chloe, who no longer had the right to stay away, were also there, although their faces revealed more anger and regret than anything else. The lawyer, with his usual formality, opened the document and began to read the words written by Gregory in the firm handwriting that still carried the strength of a man who, despite all the difficulties, had not lost his clarity of thought. To my beloved daughter, Chloe, the lawyer read slowly, I leave everything I ever dreamed could be yours. A father's love, even in my darkest moments, never waned. However, what I can teach you now is this lesson. Time is the most precious commodity we have, and when we ignore it, it slips away without mercy. I deeply regret that it was too late for you to understand this. The choices I have made in my life and the moments I have let slip by, especially in the last few years, reflect the truth of our estrangement. I wish you all the happiness you can find, but now I can no longer be there to guide you. There was a pause, and the lawyer looked at the two women in the room. Abigail, with tears in her eyes, pressed her lips together, as if she wanted to keep quiet, so as not to show any more weakness. Chloe, at her side, was tense, her eyes fixed on the paper the lawyer was holding, trying to process the words that struck her heart with the weight of truth. "To my ex-wife Abigail," the lawyer continued, his voice echoing, "I leave a reflection more than an inheritance. For many years, our life was based on broken promises and impersonal silences. I had hoped that in the end, we would be able to rediscover the meaning of love, but unfortunately, that did not happen. Despite all the effort I put into my work, I know that the true richness of a life is in the relationships we build, not in the possessions we accumulate. I hope that somehow you will learn to deal with what was left behind, and that in the future, you will be able to find peace." The words were like a blow, and Abigail couldn't hold back the tears that began to stream down her face. She tried to look away, as if she could erase what she had just heard, but it was impossible to ignore the impact of Gregory's words. "Now," the lawyer said, finally turning to Declan and Jessica, "Gregory left everything he had, not in material possessions, but in his heart, to you two. He knew that your support, your loyalty, and your unconditional love were the only things that truly sustained him in these last days. Therefore, everything that was left, he left in your hands." Declan and Jessica exchanged silent glances. They had already prepared themselves for Gregory's decision, but hearing it in such definitive words was something that still touched them deeply. Declan, with a firm but serene gaze, was the first to speak, breaking the silence that followed. "We don't need material things, Gregory. What he left us can't be bought. What he gave us was a life lesson, and that's what we'll take with us. We'll honor his memory the best we can," Declan said, his voice calm but full of emotion. Jessica, her eyes shining, added, "He always taught us the importance of being true to ourselves, and that's what we did, until the end. We'll continue to care for him, now the way he wanted." Abigail and Chloe were silent now, Gregory's words weighing on their hearts. There was nothing else to say. They had lost more than material things. They had lost the chance to reconnect, to reclaim the love of a man who, even in his darkest moments, still tried to teach them a life lesson. The knowledge of that broke their hearts. Declan and Jessica looked at them, but there was no resentment in their eyes, only the firm certainty that they had done the right thing. Gregory had not left them a legacy of money or property, but a legacy of love and loyalty, which had become a true legacy of wisdom. And with that, they knew they were ready to honor the memory of their friend in the most honest way possible. Abigail and Chloe, on the other hand, stood there, staring into the emptiness of what they had lost. They were still immersed in belated regret, knowing that although time could not be reversed, they could learn from the pain and perhaps one day find their way back to what truly mattered. But for now, the weight of Gregory's absence was immeasurable and the regret inescapable. Did you like today's story? Then leave your like, subscribe to our channel, and activate the notification bell. By doing so, you will not miss our next story.